Welcome to City Cinematheque, where the art and pleasure of the movies are the subject of serious discussion. I'm your host, Jerry Carlson, and I teach film studies at the City College of the City University of New York. Today, it's our great pleasure to present the 1966 Ukrainian film, Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors, directed by Sergei Parajanov. This film is considered a masterpiece of Ukrainian cinema and in fact is the centerpiece of what came to be known as the new Ukrainian cinema, the poetic cinema of the 1960s and 1970s. This film is enormously rich in color, in shape, in camera movement, and in its portrayal of folkloric culture. We'll be talking about that and a number of other things after today's screening. It's a pleasure to have with us Professor Myroslav Shkandrij, who is a noted expert on the cultural history of Ukraine. Now, enjoy this magnificent work, Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors. Welcome back to City Cinematheque. I hope you've enjoyed this experience of seeing what a film I can actually call is sumptuous and an extraordinary work of the new Ukrainian cinema, Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors. To say the least, there's a lot to talk about this film. And it's a pleasure to welcome to City Cinematheque Professor Myroslav Shkandrij, who is a visiting professor of Ukrainian culture and history and arts at Columbia University and is an emeritus professor from the University of Manitoba. He's written several books on the cultural history of Ukraine and has been teaching Ukrainian cinema of several epochs for many, many years. Welcome, Myroslav, to City Cinematheque.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Great. So let's start with the origin of this film, because this is a film that's so strikingly cinematic that it might surprise people that it is an adaptation of a highly regarded Ukrainian novel. What's the novel? What's its importance? And so how does that then translate into the film?
It's by a very well-known Ukrainian modernist writer called Kotsiubynsky, Mykhailo Kotsiubynsky. And the novel is the same name as the film, Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors, and it was produced around 1909, 1910. Oh. Now that was a neo-romantic revival, a period when Eastern European writers, artists were fascinated by the sort of romantic past, and they were fascinated by exotic cultures. Mm. So the Hutsuls, which is the mountain people, right, the mountain tribe, if you like, was a very popular theme, not just in Ukrainian literature and arts, but in Polish and other East European countries. Many artists went to the mountains and discovered these people. So the origin is in this neo-romantic revival. Kotsiubynsky spent quite a long time in this mountain village, which turned out to be the same village that Parajanov went to. And Parajanov also spent a year or so in that same area, learning the culture, fascinated by the way the local people lived, by their arts and crafts. And so it was a kind of a second breathing of this novel in the 60s.
Well, no, and so there's, you explain very well the fact that this is a very immersive film. I mean, you feel that the filmmaker wants you, I'm going to invite you inside. This is a culture that is going to be different from your daily experience, and you're going to see it not as the kind of traveling outsider, but you're going to be immersed in it himself. So I'm not really surprised by the fact that both the original author and Parajanov, had done this, their own deep immersive research.
That's right. They actually took many actors from the village. There were professional actors in the main roles, but a lot of non-professionals were drafted and took part, and the locals participated in the sense that all the sets, all the clothing, all the artifacts were actually taken from the village or neighboring villages. And very often the ordinary people, the local people, would give advice on what's authentic, how you should do things. They were actually quite upset in that one scene during the betrothal where he uses the yoke.
Yes.
That was not in their culture. But Parajanov kept it anyway.
But you know, there is this way in which, how should I put it? We think of a lot of ethnographic films as actually kind of dull because they're just so observational. Right. And this is you could also say this is deeply ethnographic, but it's this activist ethnography that these village people are participating, co-creating with him in some important sense. Right,
something magical took place in that film. There was some kind of cooperation, collaboration between the local people and Parajanov's own love of this colorful, exotic, strange land. And he also was helped by the fact that he had some brilliant individuals working with him. So Myroslav Shkandrij, the composer, did a fantastic job on the sound.
Right.
And they used the sounds of everyday life in the mountains, those strange, odd noises, but it was a very sensuous or sensual film in that.
Absolutely. No, and you're absolutely correct on that, and I think it's something that people come away with. And you know, when this film was made in the mid-'60s, we didn't use the same vocabulary perhaps we use today, that even everybody, just casual film. But so now we're aware much more, since many of us have a lot of speakers in our home entertainment systems, so we can do that, of sound design. Right. And not just music, but what the overall patterning of all the sounds is in a work. And this is so rich, right. As rich as the color palettes.
That's right. And he took unusual instruments that the Hutsul people use on a regular basis.
Right.
But he found the extraordinary ones, the strange sounding ones. Often he couldn't record them in the mountains, so they actually transported them to the studios in Kiev, including those enormous long trombitas,
yeah,
which took up entire carriages on the train. They took them to the studios to get the good sound.
All I can think of is that poor ticket agent. How many seats does this horn need, or do you need an entire carriage to get this horn to keep? So let's just step back just for 1 second. Because this film is so deeply Ukrainian in so many ways. So I think it's important for us to point out that the director was not Ukrainian. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about Parajanov and how he ends up to be the guy making this film.
Well, born in Georgia, but I think of Armenian background. But he went to cinema art school in Kiev. And he also did some training elsewhere. But he became part of the cultural revival in Ukraine. And he pulled together a fascinating group of people, all of them unknown at the time, and drew them into making this film. And it became a classic. This film launched the new Ukrainian cinema of the 60s. And it has remained probably the most loved, the most important, the most popular Ukrainian film. It's become a signature for Ukrainian cinema around the world. It won many awards, and it is still today appreciated by audiences.
Well, I'm sure for many of our viewers who've seen it for the first time, I mean, there's a kind of wow effect to this film. That is, what did I just see? And one of the things I think that we're already helping do with the film is that, how should I put this? Some of the I've read some of the first responses to the film going back in the 60s, you know, abroad, and it's kind of like, that was great. I'm not sure what it was, but it was great. And the point is that it is something. It's not just a set of effects, and that he's deeply engaged in trying to recover aspects of this culture, preserve them, and present them in this extraordinarily dynamic way. I mean, using this kind of full toolkit of the cinema.
Well, Ukrainian cinema is sometimes called lyrical.
Right.
I mean, going back to Dovzhenko.
Right, exactly.
These scenes that come one after the other, where the audience has to put the narrative together. You have to string it together. So he's in that tradition. But also, I mean, it was an attempt. I think it's important to contextualize it within the 60s.
Please,
as well.
please do so.
This was a period when the thaw came after Stalin's death, and some degree of autonomy was allowed in Ukrainian arts, literature, and film production. And an entire young generation got excited by their past, their traditions. There was a revival of interest in folklore, folk traditions, and so on. And these people created this sort of new literature and new art. It was very much based on the personal and the subjective, getting away from the party's views, the need for civic expression, looking at individual lives, personal lives. So the close-ups, the restoring of dignity to individual lives, simple people,
right.
simple events of everyday existence. This was part of a tradition. There's a lot of poetry written about just everyday objects around the kitchen. And it was a way of showing that the lives of ordinary people are worthwhile, and they have their own tragedies, they have their own successes. That was part of the tradition. And this became a marker of what happened in the 60s. I should also say this film is very important for one other reason. It was produced in '64, but its first showing was in Kiev in September 1965. Parajanov gave an introductory remark, and after that, three dissidents got up on stage. Ivan Dzyuba, the main dissident of the 60s, gave a speech in which he told people that at that moment, arrests were taking place of Ukrainian intellectuals and students throughout Ukraine. Very shortly after that, the microphone was pulled out of his hands, music began blaring, they were dragged off stage, and the three main dissidents, Chornovil, Vasil Stus, and Ivan Dzyuba, lost their jobs and were from them persecuted. So the film marks also the beginning of that dissident movement.
Okay, so let's come back to another aspect of the film that's also part of this assertiveness, and that is within the sound design. One component of sound is, of course, speech. Right. And so, what's the relationship between of this film to how the Hutsul speak as a particular form of Ukrainian, to the use of Ukrainian, and then to the fact that the common practice was to dub all films into Russian for the distribution across the Soviet Union?
Well, the Hutsul dialect is slightly different from mainstream or, say, central Ukrainian dialects, but it's part of its charm.
Right.
There was no attempt to. Actually they exploited that.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
As did Kotsiubynsky's novel.
Right.
So it was part of the joy of listening to this rather strong accent.
Right.
With its own rhythms, with its own charms, but also with its own vocal traditions. So the singing, the wailing at the keening at the funeral,
right,
very typical, and the the local people told Parajanov, this is the way we do it, and this is how we're going to do it on the film. These things were partly pulled out of the people by Parajanov and his crew, but also there was a large contribution in the singing, in the conversations, in the keening, the wailing, all that by the local people.
From what I've read about the production in this was, there's several angles to this. I mean, one angle is, of course, the assertion of the distinctiveness of the culture and the pleasures, but also there's a little bit of, I say to its advantage, a little bit of trickery here, because these sounds and all of this is so specific, so it presented this huge problem of how would we ever dub this, because this is so distinctive and it's so well woven together, and so in a certain sense they protect, while serving their cause, they protected themselves against the change, which is
right. That's quite astute, because there's no way you can dub this thing. It's just impossible.
No, and I must say that on my most recent, I've seen this film, through the years a number of times, but it had been a while. And when I had first, for example, heard the horns, I was going, yeah, I know that's part of this sound in this film, but it's also a modernist score that is, using the folkloric and in this kind of, modernist trick, you hear the sound before you get the visual of the horn. So it can be, it's both Hutsul, but it's also this modernist dissonant sound in the way in which Bartók in Hungary does very similar things. And another person who loved going to the Carpathians.
Right. It's a very modernist. In the New Ukrainian Music Festival, which took place here in New York last year, part of that score by Skorik was played. And it sounds very modernistic even to this day, because it's that reworking of the tunes, but with original and unusual instruments. But also there's a sort of a broken and edginess to part of it. That's the background music.
Right. Okay.
And it's still successful to this day.
So let's move forward a little bit. So this film is, as I've said, and you certainly have backed up, and you're the expert on this. This is a kind of launching pad for the new Ukrainian cinema and this sense of cultural revival. What happens in these years? This is a coming out in a moment of thaw, but that doesn't mean it's easy, and it doesn't mean it goes on forever.
No, young people, students began traveling from house to house, caroling, and religious ceremonies were banned or looked down upon. There was a revival of that. Just as in the film, you see people dress up for Christmas. The old traditions started coming back, an interest in folk songs and the literature. All this was part of the 60s, but by the end of the 60s, serious repression was applied. Many people who were prominent writers suffered, including Stus, who got up on the stage in 65. He was put away for a very long time and eventually died in prison, although he continued writing, and his writings were smuggled out and have been published. In 72, there was a massive wave of arrests.
Okay.
And pretty much all the most important intellectuals and creative figures were, in one way or another, punished. Several were actually murdered. So there was a dampening effect all around. But the 60s left its mark.
Okay.
And these works, these creations in literature, art, and film continued to percolate in the population. An underground literature also developed, and an underground art movement, nonconformist art movement also developed, and maintained itself until the end of the Soviet Union.
Okay, okay. Now let's just go back a little bit to the story. Itself. What do you just make of these characters themselves? I mean, are they? Do you think there's almost an immediate allegorical reading of the characters? As Ivan is the quintessential Hutsul, etc. How do you think that?
That's a good question. I'm not quite sure. I can only give you my subjective view. It seems to me, it seemed to me when I saw the film, that there was a suggestion of some sort of inability in Ukrainian culture to come together, to be whole. I mean, if I'm looking for a metaphorical meaning, it would be something around the fact that you're not able to become a family, you're not able to become a full, authentic grouping. There's always something in the way, and I think perhaps people did interpret it that way. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it, I think, is the fact that these people are real people. They're people with tremendous personal dignity, strength of character, and so that in itself is a message that these are not rural idiots that that
okay, point well taken. Yeah,
that Marxists sometimes pick up on that phrase, rural idiocy. That is something that Ukrainians have struggled against because they've often been branded as villagers or peasants or something like that. And here all of a sudden you have that sense of, wow, these people really have something precious and remarkable that we can learn from.
Well, and I think that comes back also to the way he treats them cinematically. So that there is a way to use all of these costumes, but to make it a museum piece. That, look, here is a dead culture, but we've got some really cool trinkets, from it, and we're going to. And that seems to be one of the things that the film is most against. That is, if we're going to be using this material culture, the material culture of the Hutsuls, we're going to show you it is a living culture, and one that has individuals. Because we're going to be allied with the desires and agencies of these characters, including the magic of love and its relationship to nature in the film, that as well as the tragedy of death and the cycles of nature incumbent in that. But and again, one of the traditions that goes back to Doshenko is that not only are these rounded human beings, not psychological creatures like Anna Karenina or something of that sort, but rounded in their culture, itself, a fullness of life they're given in the film, and that's an extraordinary accomplishment.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that Parajanov was very keen to emphasize is the close relationship to nature.
Right.
This is a culture that lived within nature, close to nature, with nature, everything about their lives, the whittling of wood, the rafts that they control going down the fast rivers. They're enormously skillful in doing this. The annual trip with the sheep up to the top of the mountain, the making of cheese and coming back, all these things are, they're rooted in nature, and they have a special relationship to nature. And I think that's also part of the message, that Ukrainian culture, Ukrainians still have this close intimacy with natural phenomena.
Well, I'm going to push it even just even a little further, because you have the representation of the importance of religion, but a particular mixture, of Christianity that's unique. You have the sorcery aspect to it, the so-called pagan practices. But then the more benign and third stream is what you were always talking about, which is this kind of animist relationship with nature, that nature is not this dead thing over there or this just organic thing. No, it's a living thing that you're in a relationship with at all times.
And it's still that way in Ukraine today. People are following the magnetic spots on the sun, and they are quite convinced that their health depends on how this develops. They're very aware of things going on in nature around them, even to the point of it being a bit mystical to this
absolutely.
day. And I think that's clear in the film because of this dual religious, pagan, Christian mixture of beliefs. The fact that people come back, a lot of people believe and did then believe that people come back in different forms.
Right, absolutely.
The idea that the dead girl comes back as a deer, this is a sign from nature, and therefore you have to be very understanding of nature, very good to nature, because it is speaking to you from the past. And then you got the whole title of the film, Shadows of Forgotten Ancestor. These people exist. The past culture, the past souls, they're here. They're with us. Ukrainians believe Christmas Eve, for example, they always set a plate for the dead.
Okay.
They can come and visit. And there's always a setting for them. So this idea of the past dead looking in the window is still part of the culture.
Well, I think we have to end now, but I think that's actually a very good place, to end, thinking about this deeply textured culture and its different notions of time and spirituality. Thanks so much. And if you'd like to know more about City Cinematheque or about the other programming here at City University Television, we have a way for you to find out. It's not going to be a surprise. It's our website. So go to www.tv.cuny.edu. There you're going to find listings of all of our films, the wide range of programs produced by City University Television, and more. You can even send us an email if you want. There's ways to do that. So please visit www.tv.cuny.edu. Okay. Myroslav, what a pleasure to have you here, bringing such a breadth and depth of knowledge of Ukrainian culture. Look forward to another chance to chat with you.
Thanks, it's been a pleasure.
Great. And thank you for joining us here today on City Cinematheque. And I hope you join us again on another episode as we continue our stroll through the archives of film history. But it's bye for now.